My family forced me to take the blame and go to prison in place of my younger brother. My name is Marcus Hale, and the night my family decided my life was worth less than my brother's, everything I thought I knew about loyalty shattered. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Ethan's Way. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It was 1:47 a.m. when the pounding on my apartment door jolted me awake. At first I thought it was a neighbor locked out again, or maybe the police doing a welfare check on the wrong unit, but the pounding was frantic, uneven, and I recognized the muffled voice behind it. "Marcus, open up. It's bad." I yanked the door open, still half in a dream, and there was Liam, my 23-year-old brother, shirt torn, face pale, hands trembling. Behind him the hallway light flickered in a way that made him look almost ghostly. "What happened?" I asked, already bracing for trouble. Liam had a way of attracting it, small-time hustles, unpaid debts, shady friends. But this time it was different. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. I hit someone," he stammered, voice shaking. "With the car. They're hurt real bad." I didn't know what to do, so I drove off. The words didn't land all at once. They came in pieces like shards of glass I didn't want to pick up. "You left the scene," I said, my stomach dropping. Before I could say anything else, there was a heavier set of footsteps in the hall. My mother appeared, hair thrown into a bun, her thin cardigan clutched around her. "Marcus, honey, we need to talk inside." Within minutes, my small living room became a war council. My mother paced, wringing her hands. Liam sat hunched over, rocking slightly. My aunt, who tagged along, sat in the corner with her arms folded like she'd already made her decision. "Marcus," my mother began, voice low and urgent. "You know Liam's got a record. If he gets another felony, they'll bury him. You're clean. You could take this. The lawyer will get you a deal. Maybe probation." I stared at her, thinking she must be out of her mind. "You're asking me to confess to a hit and run I didn't commit. I'm asking you to save your brother's life." She snapped, and then softened it with a sigh. "Family protects each other. You've always been the strong one." Liam finally looked up. His lip quivered. "Please, Marcus, I swear I'll make it right. I'll pay you back for anything you lose. I can't go to prison again." The room closed in on me. Every pair of eyes was on me, not with love, but with expectation, like I was a tool being sharpened for a job I didn't want. My mother reached for my hand, squeezing it, the way she used to when I was a kid, when I'd get nervous before a school recital. "You've always looked out for him," she whispered. "Don't stop now." The truth, I'd spent my whole life cleaning up Liam's messes, covering for him when he skipped school, paying off his gambling debts, lying to our father when he wrecked the family car. But this was different. This wasn't about a scuffed bumper or a missing $50. This was about a life, a stranger's life, and mine. Still, I saw the fear in my mother's eyes, the desperation in my brother's voice, and the guilt tightened around my throat like a rope. I nodded, but it wasn't agreement, it was resignation. The knock came again at 2:12 a.m., only this time it was police. 2 officers, polite but firm, asked if I was Marcus Hale. I said yes. They said I was under arrest for leaving the scene of an accident causing serious bodily injury. As they cuffed me, I caught my mother's eyes over their shoulders. She mouthed, "It's okay." At the station, they placed me in a cold interview room with a flickering light and a thin folder on the table. A detective came in, dropped into the chair opposite me, and slid a statement across. "Your family says you want to clear this up," he said, pen tapping against the paper. "Sign this and the DA can work out a plea deal." I glanced at the pages, dense blocks of legal text I could barely focus on. Every instinct screamed not to sign, but my mother's voice echoed in my head. "Probation, quick deal, keep Liam out of prison." "Do I get a lawyer?" I asked. "They'll appoint you one," he said with a shrug. "But honestly, you sign this, you'll probably be home in a week." It was the lie I wanted to believe. I took the pen, my hand shaking, and wrote my name. The detective's smile was thin and satisfied. "Oh, we'll take care of you," he said. And I realized too late that taking care could mean burying me 6 feet deep in the system. When they finally put me in a holding cell, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by something heavier, an awareness that I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I imagined the injured person lying in a hospital bed, their family praying for them. And I imagined my own family sitting in my apartment right now, relieved that I'd handled it for them. In that moment, the weight of what I'd agreed to wasn't just on my shoulders, It was inside my chest, pressing against my ribs, making it hard to breathe. And somewhere deep down, I already knew they weren't going to save me. They were going to leave me here. They woke me just after dawn, the clang of the cell door snapping me out of a shallow, restless sleep. A uniformed officer barked my name, and before I could even stand fully upright, I was marched down a narrow hallway into another interview room. The fluorescent light above hummed like it had a grudge against my ears. A paper cup of coffee was set in front of me, lukewarm, bitter, the kind of thing that tasted more like punishment than comfort. The man across from me introduced himself as my court-appointed attorney. Mid-40s, thinning hair, eyes that looked both tired and disinterested. "Marcus," he said, glancing briefly at the file in front of him. "Your case is straightforward. You've already signed the confession. The best we can hope for now is to negotiate a lighter sentence." It was like being told the ship had sunk and my only hope was a slightly nicer lifeboat. Wait, shouldn't we be talking about evidence about what actually happened? He sighed, tapping the file with his pen. "There's dashcam footage placing your family's car at the scene, your statement admitting fault, and witnesses who saw a man matching your description leaving the vehicle. You want to fight this? You'll be looking at years, not months." I leaned back, the chair creaking. "Months. Under the plea deal I think I can get, he said you'd be looking at maybe 18 months in prison with good behavior. Out in a year. A year." The number sat in my gut like a stone. It wasn't probation. It wasn't a slap on the wrist. My mother had made it sound like I'd be home before I missed the next season of football. And then the attorney leaned forward. "I understand your brother has priors. He wouldn't get this kind of offer. You're doing the right thing for your family." There it was again. For your family. The phrase that had been weaponized against me my whole life. When I was led back to my cell, I asked for my phone call. The officer watched me closely as I dialed my mother's number. She picked up on the third ring, her voice hushed. "Marcus. Oh, thank God. Did they treat you okay?" "They're offering 18 months, I said flatly. "That's not what you told me." There was a pause, the faint sound of her exhaling smoke on the other end. "It's still better than what Liam would get." "You can handle it, Marcus. You're strong." I wanted to scream. Instead, I swallowed it down. "Anne and Liam." "Where is he right now?" "He's keeping a low profile," she said. Her voice faltered for just a second before she recovered. "Don't worry about him. Just focus on getting through this." The next week blurred into a hush of holding cells, preliminary hearings, and whispered conversations with an attorney who seemed more interested in clearing his caseload than clearing my name. The court moved with disturbing speed, and when my sentencing day arrived, I was barely given time to process it. The judge looked at me like I was already a file in a drawer, not a person. My mother sat behind me in the gallery next to Liam, whose clean shirt and fixed gaze made him look like an innocent bystander instead of the reason I was there. 18 months in state prison, the judge declared. Credit for time served. Defendant is remanded immediately. The gavel fell, and with it, the last illusion that this was going to be quick or painless. The transport bus to the prison smelled like sweat bleach and resignation. I sat chained at the wrists and ankles, staring out the narrow, reinforced window as the city rolled by. Somewhere in those streets, Liam was walking free, breathing air, without a schedule, eating food that hadn't been ladled onto a tray by someone in gloves. When we arrived, the gates closed behind us with a metallic finality that made my stomach twist. I was processed like inventory, photographed, fingerprinted, stripped, issued a number and a uniform that didn't fit. The guard rattled off rules. I barely heard lights out at 10. No talking during count. Keep your head down unless you want trouble. That night, lying in a narrow bunk with a thin blanket, I stared at the ceiling and replayed my mother's voice in my head. "You're strong. You can handle it." But in the quiet, I realized something. Strength wasn't the same as blind obedience. Strength was knowing when to stop being someone else's shield. And as much as I hated myself for signing that confession, a small, stubborn ember inside me refused to die. I didn't know how yet, but I would find a way to make them regret what they'd done to me. Prison has its own gravity. The air feels heavier, the light harsher, the hours longer. It doesn't just lock up your body, it tries to crush your mind. You either adapt or you let that weight break you. By the end of my first week inside, I understood that survival here wasn't about size or strength. It was about knowing where you stood in the invisible map of this place. Who owned which corner of the yard? Which tables in the chow hall you never sat at? Which guards looked the other way? and which ones would bury you in the hole for blinking wrong. My cellmate Ortiz was my reluctant guide. He was wiry mid-40s with tattoos curling up his neck and eyes that never fully closed even when he was resting. He'd been inside for almost 2 decades, long enough to read a man in seconds. The first night while I sat on the upper bunk staring at the cinder block wall, he looked up at me and said, "You're not built for this. Not yet. Keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, and you'll do your time." I didn't answer, because the truth was I didn't even know how to do my time. I'd been thrown into this place without warning, without preparation, sacrificed like a pawn on a chessboard I hadn't even agreed to play. The noise was constant. Even in the dead of night, the prison breathed a mixture of murmurs, footsteps, distant shouting, the metallic clank of gates and bars. It got under your skin, made you feel like silence was something you'd never experience again. I learned fast that eyes were always on you. The lifers studied new arrivals like fishermen watching the water for movement. They wanted to know if you were prey, predator, or just someone to ignore. I made myself as small as possible, but even then I could feel the weight of their curiosity. It was during one of my first afternoons in the day room that I heard something I couldn't unhear. 2 guys were at a table near the corner playing cards, their conversation low, but not low enough. "Yeah, I heard about that hit and run," one said, flicking a card down. "Kid plowed into somebody, almost killed him. Wasn't the driver some punk kid?" the other asked. "Nah," the first guy said, lowering his voice slightly. "Kid's older brother took the rap. Family's got some kind of pull on the outside. Whole thing's a setup." My hands froze mid-page in the book I'd been pretending to read. My pulse hammered in my ears. They weren't talking about a case, they were talking about my case. I forced my eyes to stay on the page, but every syllable they spoke was like a blade against my skin. The story was already in here, being passed around like it was just another piece of gossip. And worse, people knew it was a lie. Visitation day came the next morning. The guards moved us in groups, our chains rattling as we shuffled into the visitation room. The place smelled like burnt coffee and overused disinfectant. My mother was already seated at one of the bolted-down tables, a paper cup between her hands. Liam sat next to her in a pressed shirt, looking like the picture of clean living. He smiled when he saw me, a thin, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Marcus," he said as I sat down, "how you holding up?" I studied him for a moment before answering. "How do you think I'm holding up? I'm in here for something you did." Liam's smile faltered, and he glanced at our mother like she might throw him a lifeline. "She did?" "Marcus, we've been over this," she said in a low voice, leaning forward. "This was what had to be done. You're strong enough to get through this. Liam wouldn't have survived it." "Survived it?" I repeated, my voice sharpening. "Do you hear yourself? You're talking like this is some small favor. I'm in prison, Mom." Her eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with the stubborn certainty of someone who'd already decided her version of the truth was the only one that mattered. "We take care of each other in this family. This is you taking care of Liam." Family. That word hit different now. In her mouth, it wasn't about love or loyalty, it was about leverage. Back in my cell that night, Ortiz was stretched out on his bunk, flipping through an old magazine. He looked up at me and said, "Bad visit." I sat on the edge of my bunk, elbows on my knees. They think I'm doing them a favor, like I'm some kind of shield they can hide behind. "That's exactly what you are," Ortiz said without sympathy, "and they'll keep you there until you stop letting them." I didn't answer, but the words stuck. The weeks blurred into each other. Morning count chow, yard time lock-in. I learned who would trade a packet of ramen for a favor and who would stab you for looking at them too long. I learned how to make the food in the commissary stretch and how to keep my back to the wall in the shower room. But every so often that conversation in the day room replayed in my head. People in here knew I was innocent. If they knew, then maybe others did too. People on the outside who weren't talking. People who could prove it. I started keeping a mental map of that night. Liam's face at my door. The exact words he'd used. My mother's hand squeezing mine. The way she'd said probation with so much certainty. The timing of the police arriving like they'd been waiting for the go-ahead. The cracks were there. I just had to find a way to pull them open. One night, as I lay in my bunk listening to Ortiz's slow, steady breathing below, I realized something important. I'd been thinking about this place only in terms of survival like Ortiz had told me. But survival wasn't enough. If I wanted to get out and stay out, I couldn't just keep my head down. I had to start working the system the same way my family had worked me. The thought settled in my chest like a stone, heavy but solid. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. The first thing I learned about prison was that it had its own language. Not just slang, but an entire unspoken code. Who you nodded to in the yard, how long you held eye contact, the way you stood in line for chow, every small choice could earn you protection or paint a target on your back. Ortiz was right. You either learned fast or you became someone else's entertainment. But there was something else I was starting to understand. Information in here was like currency, and if you had the right kind, you could trade your way to almost anything. And I was going to need information, a lot of it. I started spending more time in the library. Not because I cared about the books, though they were better company than most of the people here, but because the library was one of the few places where inmates from different units crossed paths without the constant eyes of the guards. You could overhear things in there if you kept quiet and blended in. One afternoon, I caught two older guys at the back table whispering about a case they'd been reading up on. The details caught my ear: hit-and-run traffic cam footage, plea deals. My ears sharpened at the mention of someone taking the fall. I didn't interrupt. I didn't even look up. But I let their voices sink into my memory like drops of ink into water. It confirmed something I'd been feeling since that conversation in the day room. My case wasn't just known, it was understood in here, and not in the way the prosecution had painted it. A week later, I met Harris. He was in his late 50s, a lean man with glasses and an odd stillness about him, like he measured every word before he spoke it. He worked in the prison law library, which meant he had access to case files, legal forms, and the kind of procedural knowledge that could either get you out sooner or keep you locked away forever. "You're the guy who took the hit for his brother," he said one day, not as a question, but as a statement. I didn't answer at first. I'd been careful not to confirm or deny anything to anyone in here. But something in his tone, calm, non-judgmental, made me lower my guard just a little. "Why do you care?" I asked. "Because I've seen this before," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Family loyalty gets weaponized, and you're not the first person who signed something they didn't understand." He slid a form across the table. "Public records request. You file this, you can get the discovery from your case, the stuff your lawyer had. Might be things you never saw." That night in my cell, I stared at the form for a long time. My first instinct was hesitation. My family had made it clear I wasn't supposed to dig. I was supposed to do my time quietly and come home grateful I'd saved my brother. But that ember inside me, the one that had been growing since the night I was arrested, wasn't going out. If there was something in that discovery packet that didn't match the story I'd been told, I wanted to see it. The next day, I filled out the form and gave it to Harris to file. In the meantime, I started reconstructing that night in my head. Over and over, I replayed every detail. The pounding at my door, Liam's torn shirt, pale face, trembling hands, my mother's sudden arrival cardigan clutched tight, the way she'd already had the narrative ready before I'd even asked for details. The timing of the police knock less than 30 minutes after Liam showed up. It was too fast, too coordinated, like someone had called them once I'd agreed to take the fall. 2 weeks later, Harris slid a thick manila envelope across the table in the library. "Your discovery," he said simply. I took it back to my cell, my hands sweating despite the cold concrete under my feet. Ortiz was asleep on the lower bunk, snoring lightly, so I sat on the edge of my bed and started going through it. There were photos from the traffic cam, grainy black and white images of a car matching ours speeding through an intersection. The driver's face was unclear, but there was another photo from a different angle taken by a storefront camera. The timestamp showed it was taken less than a minute later. The driver's head was turned slightly toward the passenger seat, where another figure sat. The driver was wearing a baseball cap. Liam had been wearing one that night. I'd never owned one like it. And then there were the text logs pulled from Liam's phone. Messages from his friends hours after the crash, asking if he'd made it home okay. One of them even mentioned switching seats. I stared at that line for a long time, my pulse loud in my ears. Switching seats. That meant Liam had been driving when the crash happened, but by the time anyone saw the car again, someone else was in the driver's seat. The someone else was supposed to be me. I confronted my mother at the next visitation. She sat across from me looking tired, but still holding that unshakable certainty in her eyes. "You knew about the cameras," I said. Her face didn't change, but I saw her fingers tighten around the paper cup. "Marcus, don't start this again. You knew I pressed. You knew there was proof it wasn't me, but you let me sign anyway." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Family survives as a unit. If we fall apart, we all lose. You're doing your part." "No," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I'm doing your part. I'm doing Liam's part. I'm the only one paying for what happened that night." Her expression hardened, the softness in her eyes evaporating. "If you love us, you'll see this through. Don't make me think I raised a selfish man." It was the last thing she said before the guard called time. Back in my cell, I sat in the dim light, the file spread across my knees. This was no longer about getting out. This was about deciding what kind of man I was going to be. I'd spent my life as the fixer, the shield, the one who took the blows so the rest of them could walk away clean. But for the first time, I realized I didn't have to play that role anymore, and I wasn't going to. The thing about betrayal is that once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. It's like a cracked window. You might try to ignore it, but every gust of wind rattles the glass, reminding you that it's broken. For weeks, I walked the yard with that manila envelope in my head. Every photo, every timestamp, every smug line of Liam's text messages burned into my memory. Switching seats. That detail replayed over and over, and I realized something. The only way that plan worked was if they'd prepared for it, which meant they hadn't just panicked that night, they'd planned it. I started talking more with Harris in the law library. At first it was about the paperwork, how to preserve evidence, how to request traffic cam footage before it was overwritten. But Harris had a way of steering conversations into deeper water. "You've got enough here to blow the case wide open," he said one afternoon, tapping a page with the baseball cap photo. "But you have to think about timing. Drop this too soon and they'll scramble to cover their tracks. Drop it at the right time and you'll have leverage. Leverage for what I asked. For whatever you want," he said simply. It was the first time someone had framed it that way, not just about clearing my name, but about making them feel the consequences. My chance for more information came unexpectedly. I was in the visiting room again, not expecting anyone, when a guard called my name. To my surprise, it was my aunt, the same one who'd sat silent in my apartment the night Liam came to me. She looked nervous, glancing around before sitting down. "Marcos," she said, lowering her voice. "I shouldn't be here. Your mother would lose it if she knew." "Then why are you here?" She hesitated, then leaned in. "That night Liam wasn't supposed to be driving. Your mother gave him the car so he could run an errand. He'd been drinking. When the accident happened, she called him before she called anyone else. Told him to get home and she'd take care of it. She called the police after you agreed to confess. The air in my chest felt like it turned to ice. You knew, and you didn't say anything." Her eyes were wet. "I'm saying it now. But you didn't hear it from me." She slid a scrap of paper across the table, an address and a name. "This is the shop owner whose camera caught the crash. He still has the footage." Before I could respond, the guard called time and she walked away without looking back. That night, I lay on my bunk staring into the darkness, the scrap of paper hidden deep in my legal folder. It was proof, real proof, that there was more out there, but I was stuck behind bars. Or maybe not stuck, just limited. There were ways to get things done in here. I'd learned that from watching the guys who always had the newest contraband phone, the freshest commissary stash, the guards who turned a blind eye for the right favor. I asked Ortiz a simple question over breakfast the next morning. If I needed someone on the outside to pick something up, who would I talk to? He gave me a long look before answering. "Depends on what you're picking up." "Video footage," I said. "Something that could change things for me." Ortiz smirked. "Everything changes for a price." The arrangement took 2 weeks to set up. I passed the shop owner's name and address to a guy in the laundry unit who owed Ortiz a favor. He had a cousin on the outside who could walk into that shop like a regular customer and ask questions. While I waited, I went over every inconsistency I could remember, and that's when I caught it, something Liam had said during my second visit. We'd been talking about the crash, and he'd casually mentioned a street name. The problem: that street was nowhere near where my family told me the crash happened. It was several blocks away in the opposite direction, and according to the discovery packet, there were no witnesses from that street, which meant Liam had knowledge he shouldn't have unless he'd been there himself. 2 weeks later, the footage came back through Ortiz's network, grainy black and white but unmistakable. The car rolled into frame at high speed. The driver's cap caught the light, same one from the traffic cam photo. The impact was sudden, jarring the victim's body flung onto the pavement, and there in the passenger seat was a blurred figure leaning into the driver just before the crash. My stomach churned. That was Liam. This wasn't a random accident. The way they moved, how close the passenger was to the driver, it looked like a distraction, an argument, something reckless that led to disaster. And then I saw something else. The passenger door opening, seconds later, both figures switching places before speeding off. I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing the footage in my head, the casual way they switched seats like they'd done it before. It wasn't panic, it was procedure. By morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't going to beg my mother to do the right thing. I wasn't going to plead with Liam for a confession. They'd made their choice the night they decided my life was disposable. Now it was my turn to make mine. I would take this footage, the texts, the inconsistencies, and build a wall of proof so solid that when I dropped it, it wouldn't just free me, it would bury them. But Harris was right. Timing was everything. If I moved too soon, they'd spin it, say I was lying to get out early. I had to wait until I had the right people watching. And when that moment came, I'd make sure they understood exactly what it felt like to be trapped helpless, waiting for someone else to decide your fate. The hardest part wasn't getting the proof, it was sitting on it. That manila folder had become my lifeline. Inside was the traffic cam, still the store footage, the text logs, and the notes I'd been compiling in tiny, cramped handwriting. Every piece fit into a story that was nothing like the one my family had fed the police. But Harris was right. Drop it too soon, and the DA might chalk it up to a desperate inmate trying to walk early. Wait too long, and the trail might get cold. The sweet spot was to hit when they weren't ready to defend themselves. That meant I had work to do inside. In prison, information and influence work like a current. You can swim with it, fight against it, or figure out how to steer it. I decided I'd do the last. My first step was finding people who could get messages to the right ears without the prison's phone monitoring catching wind. For that, I went to Ortiz. I need a clean line to the outside, I told him in the yard, keeping my voice low. He raised an eyebrow. That's vague. I'm not talking about burner phones. I'm talking about someone whose mail gets out without it being read. Ortiz smirked. So you want the clergy? That's how I met Reverend Daniels, a soft-spoken chaplain with a white beard and a reputation for pushing the prison to do the right thing when it came to inmate rights. In here, that made him both respected and ignored in equal measure. He visited units regularly, collecting letters for spiritual counsel. Those letters were supposed to be confidential. I started attending his weekly Bible study not because I'd found God, but because I needed a reason to talk to him without drawing suspicion. Over time, I slipped him small pieces of my story. I never said I'm innocent outright. I just spoke about family obligations and truths that needed daylight. One afternoon, when the others had left, I handed him a sealed envelope. This is for someone I trust, I said. They'll know what to do with it. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. I'll see it delivered. The someone was a name Harris had given me, an investigative journalist he'd known from before his own conviction. She specialized in wrongful conviction cases and had a reputation for digging until she found bone. In the envelope, I'd included a summary of the case, the discrepancies I'd found, and hints about the footage. I didn't dare send the actual video yet, too much risk it had vanished before reaching her, but I told her exactly where to find it and who had it. While I waited for a reply, life inside didn't slow down. One afternoon in the chow hall, I spotted a new guy staring too long in my direction. He was big arms like tree trunks, shaved head, prison ink that still looked fresh. When I passed his table, he leaned back and muttered, "You're the one who took the hit for his brother." I didn't stop walking, but my jaw tightened. News traveled fast in here, and the more people knew, the more danger it brought. It wasn't lost on me that leverage can be stolen as easily as it's earned. That night, Ortiz warned me, "You better keep your paperwork tight. If anyone gets their hands on that evidence, it won't be your brother you're worried about. It'll be someone looking to trade it for a reduced sentence." I took his advice. The folder went into a hollow I'd carved into the foam of my mattress, sealed under a strip of duct tape. A week later, Reverend Daniels handed me a folded note. "Your friend says she's interested," he said quietly. In that note, the journalist Claire Madden told me she'd already pulled the police report and court transcripts. She'd seen enough red flags to start digging. Her last line made my pulse quicken. "If what you're hinting at is real, your brother isn't just guilty, he's protected. And I want to know why." Protected. The word rattled in my head all day. Was she implying what I thought she was? The next visitation, I decided to test my mother. She sat across from me in her usual pressed cardigan hands, folded smile that didn't reach her eyes. Liam wasn't there this time. I heard from someone I said casually that the DA never even pulled all the camera footage from that night. Her smile twitched. Where'd you hear that word gets around? Her eyes darted down to the table for half a second, just long enough to confirm I'd hit something raw. Marcus, don't waste your time chasing things you can't change. You're in here, you do your time, you come home. That's the deal. The deal. She said it like it had been agreed to by both sides, but I knew better. I'd never been given a choice, not a real one. Back in the law library, Harris leaned over the table, his voice low. If your journalist friend finds proof of a bigger cover-up, say the DA knowing you weren't the driver, she can make enough noise to force the court's hand. And if the DA's in on it? I asked. Harris grinned a shark's grin. Then you're not just getting out, you're taking people down with you. Claire's next letter arrived 2 weeks later. She'd spoken to the shop owner. He'd confirmed the footage was intact and that someone had come by a year ago, trying to buy it for cash. When he'd refused, they'd offered to make his life easier if he just deleted it. He didn't, but he also didn't go to the police. He didn't trust them. That told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just my mother and Liam. There were others, people with reach, who wanted this buried, and that changed everything. The decision came to me one night as I lay in my bunk staring into the dark. I wasn't going to wait for them to implode on their own. I was going to light the fuse myself, but I needed one last thing before I made my move. Confirmation from the victim if they'd survived. Their testimony could be the nail in the coffin. That was going to require a careful ask, a risky one. I'd have to send another letter through Daniels, one that couldn't be traced back to me if intercepted, because once I reached out to the victim, the game would stop being a quiet one, and I was ready for it to get loud. Reaching the victim wasn't going to be as simple as sending a letter. In prison, every line to the outside world is filtered, watched, or rerouted unless you're smart enough to bury your message in something no one will flag. I knew Reverend Daniels could get it there, but I also knew I couldn't risk the letter being obvious. If the wrong person in the chain saw me contacting the victim directly, word would get back to my family. And if my family got wind of it, they'd make sure the victim never responded. So I did what I'd always been good at. I made it look like something it wasn't. The letter started as a thank you to a supposed volunteer who'd once visited our unit generic, polite nothing that screamed legal matter. But buried in the middle was a reference only the victim would understand, the date, the intersection, and one sentence I was told I was driving. I need to know if that's the truth. No signature, just my initials. Daniels agreed to forward it to the right hands without asking questions. Then came the waiting. In prison, waiting is a skill. Days blend together, morning count, chow yard, lock in, repeat. But when you're waiting on something that could blow your whole case open every minute, feels like it's moving through molasses. I kept busy the way I always did. Yard laps, library time, with Harris making notes on every inconsistency in my case. The list was getting longer. The more I wrote, the more I realized my family's deal with me was built on a foundation of lies stacked so high, one real push could topple them all. Still at night, lying in my bunk, I couldn't stop imagining what the victim might say. Would they confirm I wasn't the driver? Would they even remember? What if they refused to get involved? The reply came 3 weeks later. Daniels handed me the envelope like it was any other piece of mail, but the weight of it in my hand felt different. The letter was short, handwritten in a careful script I remember. The driver. It wasn't you. I told the police that night, but they never called me to testify. No one from the DA's office ever asked me to identify you. I thought the case had been resolved. If you need me to speak, I will. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding harder with each pass. This wasn't just a personal vindication, it was a legal bomb. The DA had bypassed a direct eyewitness because it didn't fit their narrative. That wasn't oversight, that was deliberate. I took it straight to Harris. He whistled low as he read it. This is gold, not just for your defense, but for making the DA's office sweat. What's the next step, I asked. We sync this with your journalist friend's work. She goes public with the fact there's a living eyewitness who contradicts the conviction. You file a post-conviction relief motion at the same time. It'll force the court to address it in the open. And my family. He smirked. They'll find out the same way everyone else does when it's splashed all over the news. That night, I lay awake thinking about timing. Claire had been building her own case outside, digging into the DA's shortcuts, the shop owner's footage, and now the victim's statement. Inside, I had to make sure I could survive whatever backlash came once the story broke. because once it did, I wouldn't just be the guy who took the hit for his brother. I'd be the guy who flipped the table, and in prison, that kind of notoriety can get you hurt fast. I started talking quietly to a few guys I'd built respect with, men who had no loyalty to my family, but who respected a man standing up for himself. I didn't give them details, but I let them know that soon my name was going to mean something different in here, and I'd remember who had my back when it happened. 2 weeks later, another letter from Claire arrived. She'd confirmed the victim's story independently and interviewed the shop owner on record. She'd also uncovered something I hadn't even considered the DA handling. My case had a personal connection to a man who'd been doing business with my mother for years. That man had been at our house the week before the crash. "This isn't just about protecting your brother," she wrote. "It's about protecting someone's career. That makes it political." Political meant leverage, and leverage meant I could not only clear my name, but make sure the people who'd buried me paid for it in public. I sent my response back through Daniels: "Pull the trigger when you're ready. I'll file here the same day." The plan was simple but brutal. Claire would release her story with the footage, the victim's statement, and a detailed breakdown of the DA's omissions. I'd file my motion for relief and attach every shred of evidence we'd gathered. Harris had already helped me draft it. Once it hit, the DA would have two options: fight it and risk a public trial, where the lies unraveled, or drop the conviction quietly and try to save face. Either way, my family would lose control of the narrative. The night before we were set to move, I had one last visit from my mother. She walked in smiling like we were just here for small talk, but I didn't give her the chance. "I know about the footage," I said. "I know about the victim's statement. I know the DA's your friend's nephew." Her smile froze. "Marcus, no, you listen. You've got 2 days before the whole city knows the truth. If you have anything to say, now's your chance." She sat back slowly, her eyes narrowing. "You think this will end the way you want. You think destroying your own family will make you feel better." I leaned forward. "I think telling the truth will make me free. The rest is just fallout." We sat in silence until the guard called time. She didn't say goodbye when she left. Walking back to my cell, I felt something I hadn't felt since the night I was arrested: control. For the first time, the board was mine and I was moving the pieces. Tomorrow the fuse would be lit, and when it burned down, it wouldn't just explode my conviction. It would take the walls my family had built around their lies and reduce them to rubble. The morning of the drop, the prison felt different. It wasn't that the routines had changed. Count still blared over the intercom. At dawn, chow was still the same gray slop. The guards still eyed us like cattle, but I felt the shift in my bones. Today wasn't about surviving another day. Today was about starting the fire. I'd timed everything with Claire down to the hour. She was set to publish her piece online at 10:00 a.m. sharp. At 9:55, I'd hand Harris the motion for post-conviction relief, already signed and sealed, so he could walk it straight to the legal mailbox. That meant by the time the DA's office got the court filing, they'd already be dealing with reporters blowing up their phones. It also meant that by lunch, my family would know. I kept my head low during morning yard, pacing the outer track. Ortiz strolled up beside me, hands in his pockets. "You look like a man about to stick a fork in a socket," he said. "Close enough," I replied. He grinned. "Just remember, once it's out there, you can't pull it back. And people in here, they're going to have opinions about you airing family business." "I'm counting on it," I said, because the truth was I needed everyone inside and out to see me differently. Not as the guy who rolled over, but as the guy who fought back. At 9:55, I passed Harris the envelope in the law library. He didn't give a speech or a warning, just a nod. "Once this goes, you'll feel the ground move." I'd barely made it back to my cell when the first ripple hit. Ortiz's friend on laundry detail came jogging down the tier, whispering to anyone who'd listen that the DA's golden boy was getting roasted online. By the time chow was called, I could feel the shift in the air. Guys I barely spoke to were looking at me differently. Not curiosity this time, but a kind of sharp respect. It wasn't until dinner that I caught a glimpse of what was really happening outside. A guard passing our table muttered, "Your face is all over the damn news." Later, Ortiz filled me in from a contraband phone someone had slid him. Claire's article was front page on 3 major outlets. The headline was "Brutal. Wrongfully convicted man took fall for brother in DA-linked cover-up evidence shows." She'd included everything: the traffic cam stills, the store footage, the victim's statement, even the details about the attempted payoff to the shop owner. And she'd named names, including my mother's, including Liam's, including the DA's connection to my family's business friend. The fallout started immediately. Harris said the DA's office had already filed a no-comment statement, which was PR code for "we're in panic mode." Claire told me via Daniels that her inbox was exploding with interview requests from local TV. That night, I got a call for an emergency legal visit. When I walked into the small meeting room, I wasn't surprised to see my mother there, but I was surprised to see Liam sitting beside her. He looked pale, jittery, like he hadn't slept. My mother's expression was tight enough to crack. "You've ruined us," she hissed, the second the guard shut the door. "I told you this was coming," I said, sitting down calmly. "You could have fixed it quietly. You chose not to." Liam leaned forward, his voice low. "You think you're walking out of this clean. You think the DA is just going to roll over." "I don't think," I said. "I know, because the truth is out there now, and the victim's willing to testify." "You remember the victim, don't you, Liam?" His jaw clenched, but he didn't answer. My mother tried another angle. "Marcus, we can still control this. If you back off, I can talk to the right people, maybe get you a deal. There's only one deal I'm interested in. I cut in, I walk free. And both of you admit what you did. Publicly." She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. "You'd humiliate your own family." I leaned forward. "You stopped being my family the night you handed me to the cops." The guard opened the door, signaling time. Neither of them moved to say goodbye. The next morning, Harris told me the court had scheduled an evidentiary hearing for my motion. That was faster than I'd expected. The DA didn't want this dragging out in the news cycle, which meant they were already looking for a way to cut their losses. But the hearing was still weeks away, and I had to make it there in one piece. Word had spread through the yard Marcus is getting out, and he's taking people down with him. That kind of rep can make you allies, but it can also make you a target. 2 nights later, I woke to the sound of my cell door sliding open. Ortiz's voice came from the shadows. "Up. Now." I swung my legs over the bunk just in time to see 2 inmates I didn't recognize slip past the door, eyes hard. Ortiz stepped between us. "Not tonight, boys." They hesitated, then backed out. The door clanged shut and Ortiz just shook his head. "Told you big moves make big enemies." By the time the hearing date arrived, Claire's story had exploded beyond anything we'd imagined. National outlets were picking it up. Civil rights groups were calling for an independent investigation into the DA's office. And my family, they'd gone silent. No visits, no calls. The only sign they were still out there was a brief quote in one article. "The Hale family declines to comment at this time." Good, let them stew. The morning I was transported to court, I caught my reflection in the van's window. Same prison green, same number on my chest, but the man staring back at me wasn't the same one who'd been dragged here months ago. He wasn't a shield anymore. He was a weapon. The van ride to the courthouse was quiet except for the low rumble of the engine and the occasional metallic rattle when we hit a bump. I sat cuffed to a chain around my waist. My ankles shackled the cold steel biting into my skin. Outside the narrow slit of reinforced glass, the city moved on like nothing had happened. People walking dogs, sipping coffee, checking their phones. It was strange seeing that normal life still existed out there, knowing how far I'd been pushed from it. But today, for the first time, I wasn't being driven to be sentenced. I was being driven to fight. The courthouse was buzzing when the guards led me inside. I could feel it before I even stepped into the hearing room. Reporters stood clustered in the hallway, cameras at the ready. I heard my name more than once whispered in low voices. Inside, Claire sat in the second row, a small recorder in her lap. She gave me the briefest nod, the kind that said, "We're here. We're ready." Harris sat at the defense table, his files neatly stacked, his expression calm but charged with energy. On the other side, the DA looked different, not smug, not untouchable. His tie was slightly askew and there was a stiffness in his shoulders. His assistant leaned in to whisper something, and I caught the flash of irritation on his face. Behind him in the gallery, my mother sat rigid, her hands folded so tightly I thought her knuckles might snap. Liam was nowhere in sight. The judge entered and we all stood. This wasn't a trial, it was an evidentiary hearing, but the stakes were just as high. The goal was simple, get my conviction overturned, but that wouldn't happen unless we proved there'd been evidence suppressed, mishandled, or ignored. Harris went first. He laid out the foundation like a man building a house. "Your Honor," he began, We have incontrovertible proof that my client Marcus Hale was wrongfully convicted due to both suppression of exculpatory evidence and prosecutorial misconduct. He started with the traffic cam stills showing the blurred driver in the baseball cap, then the store footage clearer this time showing two people switching seats right after the crash. The judge leaned forward. "And you're saying this footage was available at the time of trial?" "Yes, Your Honor," Harris replied. In fact, it was offered to the DA's office before trial. They declined to obtain it. A ripple moved through the gallery. The DA's jaw tightened. Then came the victim. I hadn't seen them before today, a middle-aged man with a cane moving carefully to the stand. His voice was steady, but there was steel in it. "The driver that hit me," he said, "was not Marcus Hale. I told the responding officers that night. I even described the driver. No one from the DA's office ever contacted me again." The courtroom was silent for a beat, and I could feel the weight of that statement sinking in. My mother shifted in her seat, her gaze fixed on the floor. Harris followed with the text logs from Liam's phone, including the switching seats message. The DA objected, claiming the logs were taken out of context, but Harris was ready. Out of context, Harris said, his voice just loud enough to carry. "The only context needed is that my client's brother was in the driver's seat when the accident occurred, and my client's mother orchestrated a false confession to protect him." My mother's head snapped up at that, her eyes locking on me for the first time. If looks could kill, I'd have dropped dead right there. Then Harris played his final card, the journalist's investigative findings. Claire's reporting had uncovered the DA's personal connection to my family's business associate, the same man who had tried to buy the shop owner's silence. "Your Honor," Harris said, this was not just a bad prosecution. This was a coordinated effort to protect certain individuals at the expense of an innocent man's freedom. The DA objected again, but it sounded weaker this time, like even he knew the ground was shifting beneath him. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it short. "I took the fall because I was told it would save my brother's life," I said. "I believed my family when they said it was the right thing to do. But what they meant was it was the right thing for them, not for me, and not for the truth." I looked straight at my mother as I said the last words. She didn't flinch, but her hands gripped the bench so hard I thought the wood might splinter. By the time the hearing adjourned, the DA's face was the color of wet paper. The judge said he'd issue a ruling within 2 weeks, but from the look in his eyes I could tell he'd already made up his mind. As the guards led me out, Claire caught my eye again. She didn't smile, she just gave me that same sharp nod. We both knew once this decision came down, there'd be no putting the lid back on what we'd unleashed. Back in the transport van, Ortiz's words echoed in my head. "Once it's out there, you can't pull it back." Good. I didn't want it back. I wanted the whole damn thing to burn. 2 weeks. That's how long the judge said it could take for a ruling. But every day that passed after the hearing felt like a coin flip in slow motion, turning in the air, refusing to land. The weight gnawed at me. I tried to keep my routine morning yard laps afternoons in the library, evenings in my cell with my notes. But the tension hung over me like a storm cloud. Even Ortiz noticed. "Relax," he said one night lying back on his bunk. "If the judge was going to shoot you down, he'd have done it fast. He's taking his time because he knows he's about to embarrass people who don't like being embarrassed." I wanted to believe him, but until I heard it myself, it was all just air. On the 9th day, I got a visit from Claire. She looked sharper than I'd ever seen her black blazer hair pinned back a folder under her arm. "It's coming," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Off the record, the judge has already decided your conviction's being vacated." I exhaled a sound halfway between a laugh and a sigh. "So that's it, I'm out." "Not exactly," she said. "Vacating the conviction means you're no longer legally guilty, but the DA's office still has to decide whether to retry you. Given the press, I'd say they're looking for a way to quietly make this go away. But," she leaned in, "they might offer you a deal. No retrial time served, but only if you sign something that keeps you from suing." I stared at her. "And if I don't sign, they might try to drag it out. Hope you get tired. But you've got leverage now, Marcus, more than you realize." 2 days later, the ruling came down. The judge's order was clear. My conviction was vacated on grounds of prosecutorial misconduct and suppression of exculpatory evidence. I was to be released pending the DA's decision on whether to retry. The prison processed me in a haze of paperwork, fingerprint scans, and a half-hearted good luck from a guard who clearly didn't mean it. Ortiz was the only one who looked me in the eye when I left. "Don't waste it," he said. Freedom hit like a punch to the chest. One minute I was walking out of the gate, the next I was standing in the bright afternoon sun squinting like I'd been underground for years. Claire was there with her car, the trunk already open for my small bag of belongings. We didn't speak much on the drive. I just watched the city roll by, the same streets that had seemed so far away from my cell window now within reach again. But it wasn't homecoming, not yet. That evening, Claire took me to her office. She handed me coffee and set her recorder on the desk. "You're free to talk now," she said. "What do you want to do next? Clear your name in the public eye, or go after the people who put you there?" I didn't hesitate. "Both," she smiled faintly. "Then you need to know something. The DA's office is already working behind the scenes to settle this. I've got a source who says they're trying to get your family to convince you to sign a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for dropping the case completely." I leaned back, the coffee warm in my hands. "And if I don't sign, the case stays open?" "Yes, but with what we've got, your family's involvement, the victim's statement, the DA's connection, you could sue and win, which is why they're scared." The next morning the call came. It was my mother. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Marcus, we need to meet, somewhere private." Why, I asked. "Because this can all be over. No more court, no more press. You can move on with your life. What's the catch? You sign an agreement, no suing, no talking to reporters. They'll drop everything and you'll walk away clean." I laughed into the phone. "I already am clean. You just want to make sure the rest of the world doesn't hear the rest of the story." Her voice sharpened. "Marcus, this isn't just about you. You're going to ruin people's lives." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what you did to me." 2 days later, Liam called. His voice was tight, almost pleading. "Look, man, I screwed up. I know that, but Mom's right. If you keep pushing this, it's going to get ugly. For all of us." "It already is ugly," I said, "and you made sure I was the one living with it. I'll apologize. Publicly if you want. Just don't destroy everything." I hung up without answering. Claire had been right. The pressure was working. The DA's office was desperate to close the book without the mess of a retrial or a civil suit. But every time I thought about taking the deal, I saw my cell, the cracked paint on the ceiling, Ortiz's steady breathing in the dark. I thought about the victim limping into court to tell the truth they'd tried to bury. And I thought about my mother's face when she told me family protects each other. By the end of that week, my mind was set. If I signed that agreement, I'd get my life back, but they'd keep theirs. And that wasn't justice. That was a reset button they didn't deserve. So when the DA's office called to schedule a resolution meeting, I told them I'd be bringing my lawyer and my journalist friend, and that whatever they had to say, they could say it on the record. The resolution meeting was set for a Wednesday morning in a neutral conference room on the top floor of a downtown office building. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished mahogany table, bottled water, lined up like soldiers, everything designed to look civil professional. But I knew better. This wasn't diplomacy. This was an ambush disguised as courtesy. Harris met me outside the elevator. "You ready?" he asked. "More than ready," I said. Claire was already inside when we walked in, her recorder set neatly on the table. She gave me a quick nod before turning her attention back to the man at the head of the table, the district attorney. His suit was immaculate, his posture perfect, but I could see the stiffness in his jaw. Beside him sat his assistant, a legal pad in front of her. On the other side of the table, my mother sat with her back straight, her lips pressed into a thin line. Liam was next to her, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit his knee, bouncing under the table. The DA opened with a voice that oozed forced warmth. "Mr. Hale, we're here today to discuss a resolution that would allow everyone involved to move forward without further conflict or media attention." Harris didn't waste time. "You mean a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for dropping any possibility of retrial or civil action?" The DA's smile didn't falter. "In essence, yes. You'd be officially cleared, your record clean, and you'd be free to rebuild your life without the burden of ongoing litigation." I leaned forward, at the cost of the truth. My mother's eyes flicked to me sharp as a blade. "Marcus, this is your chance to be free, really free. Why would you throw that away just to, what? Get revenge?" I didn't look at her. I kept my gaze on the DA. "You suppressed evidence, ignored a direct eyewitness. You let my family feed me to the system because it was convenient for your office. I'm not signing anything that lets you pretend that didn't happen." The assistant DA shifted uncomfortably. The DA's smile thinned. Liam finally spoke. "Look, man, I know I messed up. I panicked, but you hid. I cut in. You let me rot while you went on with your life. You didn't panic, Liam. You made a choice. He opened his mouth, but my mother's hand on his arm shut him up. The DA cleared his throat. Mr. Hale pursuing this path could be costly. Publicly airing all of this will attract scrutiny, not just from my office, but for you as well. Are you prepared for that? I didn't hesitate. I've been living with the cost since the night they arrested me. The only difference now is you're finally going to pay yours. Claire's recorder caught every word. The rest of the meeting was a stalemate. They pushed the NDA. I refused. They warned about drawn-out legal battles. I welcomed them. When it ended, the DA's handshake was cold, his eyes flat. As I walked out, my mother called after me. Marcus, don't do this. You'll regret it. I didn't turn around. The only thing I regret is trusting you. That night, Claire published an article titled DA Offers Silence for Freedom Deal to Wrongfully Convicted Man He Refuses. It spread faster than her first story. Public opinion wasn't just turning, it was boiling. Civil rights lawyers started calling Harris, offering pro bono help. Advocacy groups wanted me to speak at events, and my family. They went to ground. No more calls, no more public sightings. Liam shut down his social media. My mother stopped answering her door for reporters, but I knew hiding wouldn't save them forever. If anything, it would make the fallout worse when the next piece hit, because Claire wasn't done. She'd gotten the shop owner to go on camera. She'd interviewed the victim in their own home, and she'd tracked down a former junior prosecutor from the DA's office who admitted off the record that the case had been handled differently because of connections. One night, Harris called me. You're about to see the real panic, he said. They've hired a PR crisis firm. That means they know it's not just about the legal case anymore, it's about public survival. Good, I said. Let them sweat. But it wasn't lost on me that cornered people get dangerous. And my family wasn't just cornered, they were trapped in a spotlight they couldn't step out of without stepping straight into an admission of guilt, which meant the next move might not come from the DA, it might come from them. The first sign that my family was about to make their move came late one night, 3 days after Claire's second article went live. I was at my small rented apartment, barely furnished, just a mattress on the floor, a folding table and 2 mismatched chairs when someone knocked. Not the sharp rap of a delivery driver, but 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I looked through the peephole. Liam, alone. I opened the door, but only halfway. You've got 30 seconds. He looked thinner, paler, like the pressure had been eating him alive. Marcus, we need to talk. It's bad. Bad for you or bad for me? Bad for all of us, he said, stepping closer. Can I come in? I let him, but I didn't sit. He paced for a few seconds, running a hand through his hair. Mom's not herself. She's talking about going public before you do. Trying to spin it so you're lying to get a payout. She's already meeting with someone from the DA's office tomorrow. I folded my arms. So she wants to bury me twice. That's not news, Liam. He stopped pacing. I'm not here for her. I'm here because I can't live like this anymore. Every time I walk into a store, I feel people staring. My friends won't pick up the phone. I can't get work. Welcome to my life for the last 18 months, I said flatly. He swallowed hard. I'll give you a statement. On record. Admit everything. I was driving. Mom told me to let you take the fall. We switched seats. Everything. I narrowed my eyes. What do you want in return? He hesitated. Immunity. Claire says if I testify, the DA might cut me a deal. No prison. I almost laughed. You're still trying to walk away clean. It's the only way I'll do it, he said, voice low. I'm not going to prison, Marcus. I studied him for a long moment. The kid who'd begged me for help that night was gone. In his place was a man cornered by the walls, closing in, looking for the smallest gap to squeeze through. Fine, I said finally. You give your statement to Claire. She runs it. And whatever deal you make after that is between you and the DA. But I'm not saving you this time. The next afternoon, Claire filmed the interview. Liam was nervous but clear. He admitted to driving to switching seats to my mother, orchestrating the whole thing. He even described the moment they pulled away from the crash site, saying, "We knew Marcus would take it." He always had. When the interview ended, Claire didn't say much, just packed up her gear and told Liam she'd be in touch about the release date. That night, I got a call from Harris. The DA's office is scrambling. They heard about the interview. They've already floated, offering your mother a deal too, lesser charges, no jail if she signs something admitting to obstruction, but claiming you were in on it from the start. My stomach tightened. So they're still trying to make me dirty, yeah, Harris said. But with Liam's statement and the victim, they're running out of room to maneuver. The following day, my mother called. Her voice was ice. You're destroying us, Marcus. Do you understand that everything I've built our reputation, it's gone? You destroyed it yourself, I said. I'm just making sure people see it. There was a long pause, then softer. You could still walk away. Take the settlement. Start over. I'm starting over, I said, without you. She hung up without another word. Claire released Liam's interview 2 days later. It was everywhere within hours, shared on social media, replayed on local news, dissected on podcasts. The public reaction was immediate and furious. The DA's office issued a statement saying they were reviewing new evidence and witness testimony. That was PR speak for we're figuring out how to get out of this without losing our jobs. A week later, the call came. The DA's office was dropping the case entirely. No retrial, no conditions. The judge signed the order the same day. My record was clear. But it wasn't just my freedom I wanted. It was the truth carved into the public record so deep it couldn't be erased. And with the interviews, the court filings, and the press coverage, it was. The night after the news broke, I walked the streets alone for hours. I passed coffee shops, bookstores, the little park where I used to sit on my lunch breaks before everything fell apart. I thought about the kid I'd been before, that knock on my door, the one who thought loyalty meant sacrificing yourself without question, the one who thought family would never use you up and toss you aside. That man was gone. I didn't forgive them. I didn't visit them. And when reporters asked if I'd ever reconcile, I told the truth. I've learned that some doors stay closed for a reason. Freedom. Real freedom didn't hit me all at once. It came in pieces, the first breath of cold morning air without a chain at my waist, the first cup of coffee I poured in my own kitchen, the first night I slept without the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. For months I'd been fighting like every step was life or death. Now the fight was over, but the echoes remained. Sometimes I still woke in the middle of the night expecting to hear the clang of cell doors. Sometimes I caught myself scanning rooms for exits just in case. I knew I'd never get those 18 months back, but I also knew I'd done something most people don't get the chance to do. I'd taken the truth, and I'd forced it into daylight. My mother and Liam had vanished from the public eye. No more statements, no more interviews. I didn't care where they were. I wasn't looking for them. People asked if I felt lighter now that I was cleared. I told them the truth, I feel heavier. But it's the kind of heavy you can carry. The kind that means you've been through hell and made it outstanding. The scars will always be there, but they're mine. They remind me that loyalty without boundaries isn't love, it's surrender. And I don't surrender anymore. So if you're watching this and you've ever been put in a position where the people you love ask you to lose yourself for them, remember my story. Protect yourself. Protect your truth. Because no matter who they are, no one has the right to lock you away physically or otherwise, and call it love. If you've lived through something like this, share your story in the comments. And if you want more stories like mine, subscribe to Ethan's Way. The truth has a way of finding its voice here.